Welcome. This is a second attempt at this video because I played back the first one after uploading it to YouTube and I wasn't happy with it. So attempt number two, it's quite sort of ironic how that will play into this. So the topic of this video is to look at a fucus and give you an interpretation of what it is in the micro sense. But just a second. I've made some notes, so hopefully it will flow a little bit better. Right, so before we look at a fucus, I feel it's a good idea to look at, shall we say, its polar opposite. This is what I call, it's a bit of a mouthful, pseudonymology, the study of pseudonyms. In a biblical sense, you could say it's on the road to Damascus. Everybody has a pseudonym, pretty much. It's that legal fiction, that name on the birth certificate. So it's quite a big topic, but we're going to condense this down and we're going to look at what that manifests, what comes from that. And it's what I call ambassador syndrome. So what is ambassador syndrome? It's the advocation of a concept. Generally it falls into three categories: religious, political, and scientific. There's crossovers with all these things and they follow the same pattern ultimately. There's also a subgroup called, what I've called, dietary Christian syndrome within this ambassador syndrome. That's nothing to do with Christianity per se, or anybody who's subscribing to the idea of being a Christian. It's more from the perception of, if you look around the world and find a lot of things don't seem to add up, but then clinging to the Bible and saying this is the absolute truth, it's like, well, if you can see everything else has been tampered with, altered, edited in one way or another, and the stories we have about history, for example, are not as they actually were, or certainly there is a perception of that. The sort of narratives we're given start to fall apart. So it's like, it would be ridiculous. What would be the odds that there would be one stone left unturned? It's the same if we use that sort of same analogy. The dietary Christian syndrome would be to advocate a particular diet. It stems really from the science ambassador syndrome, looking at a set of data and then advocating this or particular thing, but then the food that you're consuming comes from a corporate supply and it comes with a barcode on it. So would that be sort of below the radar? And it's crazy. There's the political ambassador syndrome. This was sort of highlighted in a comedy sketch. I believe it was Harry Enfield. And I have actually encountered, not just in this particular place, but to use it as an example, you'll get people who were born in Liverpool and maybe they left the city 30 years ago and they live elsewhere, but they will always say how wonderful Liverpool is and how much better it is than Manchester or whatever. And it's like, well, if it's that good, why did you leave 30 years ago? The actions and the words don't seem to match. You'll also get people will say, I'm very really proud of it, saying I'm Yorkshire through and through, born and bred, and this sort of thing. I'm not actually picking on anybody. I'm just using these purely as examples, relatable examples. I would imagine in the United States you'll get the same sort of thing. I'm a New Yorker, for example, with some sort of feeling of pride in it, some sort of identification or commonality with a group of people. You can even, it's a series of concentric circles of identification, and of course they're all external, so you may identify with a family first, then with a particular cultural group or a regional group within a culture. So you may be from a poorer community and you identify most strongly with other people from that area. And of course, what all these things have in common is they are all external, they are all concepts. So for example, look at a map, look at the boundary lines for nations. The only real indication you see in the physical is maybe a road sign or a border patrol. Very rarely is there actual physical barriers as such. Okay, you may get fences and things, but just look what nature does, a butterfly or a bird, or although you can't see them, say earthworms or something, do they stop at those borders, or is it just a concept that is held together by a belief? And of course, what can come from that is a wish to defend that identity, which ultimately is being used against you as such. But it can go to a further extreme of overcompensation. So if we were to take a concept of defining a nation on haplogroups and that sort of commonality, someone who, in terms of the political, in terms of the nationality, could identify with that country, if they look sufficiently different from the more general native population, then it can lead to a sort of, this nation is better than everybody else's nation. It's a sort of an over-justification and a reinforcement of what is just a concept at the end of the day. Just a second. Yeah, so they're all forms of conceptual attachment. They're all in the external, they're all tied to the material, physical world. Generally based on a subset of information that you hold to be true, and then you defend it. Just a second. I'm sure you're wondering why I keep saying just a second. There is a reason for this. Now, to explain it takes far longer than a single second. But you'll hear the expression, people will say just a second or hold on a second. It's a clue. If you have a perception that this is a realm that is showing you contrasts, well, if there is a second, there must be a first. So in the blink of an eye, in that moment, which is what a second is, effectively, how long is a second? 1 second. But how quick does it last? Can you ever get that precise, exact second back? I would say the answer is no, with this perception of linear time. So every second is precious, and in every second whatever is being presented, there is a counterpart to it. So the ambassador syndrome, I would say pretty much, and I include myself in this, all have varying degrees of this within us, which, if unchecked, can then turn into sort of extremism in some way. So that's the external, what I call ambassador syndrome. So what would its counterpart be? Sorry, I've just lost my looking through my bullet point notes, so hold on a few seconds. Actually, that's rather funny. At the start of the video, I said this is the second attempt, and the sort of running theme through this is my using that quote, just a second. You can also see it if you go to a doctor and you're given a diagnosis. You can go to another doctor if you're not happy with what you're being told and get a second opinion. So therefore, that implies the diagnosis is actually opinion based. We come back to ambassador syndrome effectively. Yeah, so a few seconds also is another thing that it's like a divine comedy, the way this all comes together in a way. Because the opposite of the ambassador syndrome, where you are attaching to something that is external, which is really just a concept, is a fucus. Now, a fucus, by its sort of definition, I believe it's by the Western astrology, it doesn't show up. Therefore, it is in the unseen. So what is the 13th sign in terms of the micro as opposed to the macro? Well, you could consider you have 12 cranial nerves. They are a circle around something, which would be the number 13. It's the Christ consciousness. If we look at the etymology, the spelling of a fucus, it's O-P-H-U-C-U-S. We'll do a little sketch here. The O obviously is the whole, the organic, the full circle. So I'll have to draw this and then hold it up to the camera. This, the eye. Now we can do a little shorthand sketch with the eye, the one. Now we put a head on it that's looking to the right. Not sure how it comes out on the video, whether it's reversed, but the letter P. Of course, it's a lowercase p. It's followed by the letter H, which, as when they're put together, implies a measurement of balance. So what you could actually say you have here is your lower self is in balance with the higher self. And you can run this both ways. You can go left to right or right to left with this, because you could then say your higher self is looking or communicating, which I'm sure it does, with your lower self. For your lower self to find your higher self, to find the balance inside yourself. So you have OPH, organic balance between higher and lower self. As above, so below would be another expression we could use here. That is followed by U, C, U, S. Now I've broken this down on video of few you cuss. So you're not cursing, you're not putting out a negative energy, I hope these people die horribly, or that type of thing, or I hate that group of people for whatever reason. Just that sort of negative thought. So you're not cussing, or you're at least hopefully mastering it, so you're not cussing everything or certain people out there. So that would be one of a few cuss. So don't put out a negative energy from a thought. But you see, of you see us, of few you see us. So what it is actually expressing, when the pineal gland is activated, and that creates that magical number 13. You could see it in suits of playing cards effectively. Above the king is the ace, that's like the cornerstone. And it's then pointing upward, leading onward, as it were. Where are we on my notes here? So another way of expressing, when you have this active pineal gland, you could say, and it's something I've experienced, that instant soul recognition, where there is not a word said, and there's almost like a magnetic frequency, and it's like almost like an eye communication going on between yourself and the other person who is on a similar frequency or vibration. In the sort of counterpart physical world, that would be expressed as when two people fall in love and they gaze into each other's eyes. It's that same sort of energetic exchange. It's a reciprocal exchange. The ophiuchus is when you find the balance in yourself, you have that soul recognition with others who have also achieved that in themselves. They have brought about a United States. There's the US on the end of ophiuchus, not the material play-out version, but the spiritual version, the United Spirit. That's us. The of few you see us. Because there isn't many. We could give it a label. Adrienne Elise on her channel, she refers to the term supernova soul. That would be one example. If I was listening to Archaics, the term used would be errant. Remember, they're just labels. The message is not dissimilar at all across those two channels. A supernova soul is an errant. It's just a label. It's one that goes their own way, takes the neutral path. Now that may seem a contradiction if we look at Revelations, I think it's chapter 3 verse 16. In the story, I'll have to paraphrase the passage. It's, do not be lukewarm, be hot or cold. Because if you're lukewarm, you'll spat back out. So, for example, if you are saying everything is not right in this world, but everything in the Bible is true, that's being lukewarm, for example, because it's just a conceptual belief system. And more generally, the way it is interpreted is taken as a secular history, which is totally false, and can be shown to be false as well. Unless you feel that, we go right back to the Garden of Eden story, do you know of any snake that could suddenly have this magical ability to form human words and actually speak? If you want to take it that literally, well, good luck to you. But it can be shown that you can get far more value out of it when you read it inwardly and realize that they are all states. All the characters are actually states. So it's the United States of few you see us, because not many seem to be able to do it. Generally because they're still stuck looking externally at the outside world for answers. What else have we got here? Yes, the chief cornerstone. That's another one held as a belief, as a concept, and will no doubt have a physical outlay. But when we're talking about the spiritual side, what would be the chief cornerstone? I would suggest that is when you set your boundary as to what you will no longer accept. In the case of if it's in opposition to the system, what you'll invariably find is you may be backed into a corner. Now, do you have the strength of resolve to see through, to have the courage of your convictions, of whatever you have determined and hold to be true and sacred, which I would suggest, or I'd like to hope that you have found your true self inside and know and feel that you are a sovereign being. Not the way this external world presents things, which of course leads to a thing called fear, false evidence appearing real. As I speak this, I am in that position financially, but taking active steps. So one way I can take an active step is that saying, use the resources you've got. How many of you consider the internet, the age of technology, to be something that is an asset to you? So you can reach out to people, but I'd rather replicate the pattern that nature shows. I'm referring to this mutual exchange of oxygen for carbon dioxide between humans and trees, for example. So maybe you've not looked at some of the previous videos, maybe this is new to you, first time you've listened to this channel. So I offer 3 tarot card readings. I offer mentorship if you're struggling, going through anxiety, depression, or panic attacks. They're things I've been through, and I can talk from a place of experience and listen to your circumstances, your situation, and hopefully give you a slightly different perspective. Much in the same way I'm giving you a perspective on a fucus in the micro sense, as opposed to the material outplay, which is this ambassador syndrome that is so prevalent everywhere in the world. But when you find that a fucus, you're latching on to something that is non-tangible, non-physical. It is not even a concept, because it is something you will feel and you will know inside yourself. I can only talk to you about it as a concept. The only way you'll know it is to experience it. So I think that's pretty much covered everything I wish to talk about in this video. And beautifully, I've got this down to, 24 minutes now. It was 38 in the original, but I didn't like the way it flowed, and it was like crackly noises, probably where I was moving the phone. So hopefully I'll play this one back. If I'm not happy with it, I shall delete this one and re-record it again. But hopefully that has given you a new way of looking at even something like this whole idea of a fucus, but as a sort of reminder to myself to also pass this on. I'll put the link in the description. It was a very recent Archaics live presentation with a guest called Dr. Danny, and it gives a lovely overview of the difference between the 12 and 13 sign zodiacs, why there are 2, and how they came about. That, I feel, is a very good summary video that explains it all in a very easy way to understand. But then the pattern I see with everything is whatever is played out on this world stage has already happened in the unseen. And that is something that can easily be sort of verified if you think, where does a thought come from, and from that thought what it creates. The analogy I've used before is somebody has an idea of a design for a house, gives it to an architect who draws up a plan, who gives it to a team of builders, who then create the physical objects which started as an idea. That pattern seems to repeat over and over again in this reality. So that's it for this video. Any donations gratefully received. Another hot day here, so it's the second day of not doing any further work to the new water tank, but still plenty of time, and it will get to a point where I will just, the enthusiasm is there to do it, so it won't be that much longer. I'm looking at probably getting the construction side all done on Sunday. We'll see how it goes, but like I say, there's still plenty of time with that to the target date of 30th of September. So it still gives me, 15 days or so, so that's no problem. So as always, unconditional love to you all.